sure that my neighbors just love when I do that. Alright, so what is up, guys? I am here with you in the Mustang today, and this is going to be the 5 things that I hate about this car. And they do exist, trust me. I really love driving this car, and I love owning it, but it's got its deficiencies. It's not perfect. And that's what you'd expect. I mean, it's new. This car was like $35,000, and you can get them now for less than 20. So you can't really expect to get everything perfect in this car. And you know, Ford, in order to give you 400 horsepower for that amount of money, has to sacrifice somewhere else in the build process. So you know, you do see a little bit lesser quality on some materials, and I'll get into some of that a little bit later. Okay, so the number one single most annoying thing about this car, and it's visible in this shot here, is the position of these cup holders. Look at that, directly behind the shifter. So I brought a cup here, for example, especially if it's in this front position, which is a little bit smaller hole, and it's a little bit shallower even. So if you have a passenger that has a cup, and they end up putting it in here, look at that. My elbow is sitting on the cup while I'm trying to use the shifter. So especially if this cup has like a straw or something in it, you're just hitting it constantly, and there's like, or you got this like weird claw situation going on, like you're playing an arcade game, and that's just not any fun. Alright, the second thing on the list is this steering wheel. So there's a few things with the steering wheel. You'll notice here these buttons are a little bit old and worn, so some of the paint is starting to fall off, and I think the previous owner had actually tried to use some sort of touch-up like nail polish or paint or something to fix this here, but you know, that still didn't quite fix it, and there's some places where the paint is chipped off. And you can replace those buttons for, you know, less than $100, but ultimately I didn't feel like that was really worth it. I figured it would happen again anyway. And also with this steering wheel, you can adjust the height of the steering wheel, and I think this is actually all the way up right now, but it is not a telescoping steering wheel. So, you know, compared to some other cars, I feel like the steering wheel, even at its maximum height position, sits a little low. So my knees can kind of hit it sometimes, especially with the clutch pedal, having to use that. So if I could telescope it and bring it a little bit towards me, I wouldn't have as much of a problem with that. But as it is, not a lot of options. Okay, for the third thing on the list, the seats. So you'll see here that these are the GT Premium seats, which just means they're leather trimmed. I mean, the shape and everything is pretty consistent with the base model seats. And so a few things with these. First and foremost, the bolstering on these, it kind of looks okay when you in these images, I'm sure, but it's just not enough. It's not sufficient. If you're taking tight corners in this car, you're going to be holding on to the steering wheel in order to maintain your driving position more than you really would want to. It really would be nice if they would hug you a little bit closer and keep you planted in the seat going through corners. So I actually had the seat motors go out on me once in the driver's seat, and that's actually a pretty costly repair if you go through Ford to do it. I saw some quotes of like $1,400 for people to get their seats fixed. And this is a very common problem for these cars. I was lucky enough to find a used seat track from like a 2006 Mustang GT with the same seat track motor assembly, and pull that off and get that for like 20 bucks. But it's really something you don't want to have to deal with, and it shouldn't have happened after only 50,000 miles of ownership. It's kind of unacceptable in my mind for these seat motors to be failing at that point. All right, the fourth thing is going to have to be the pedal. So the pedals itself, they're fine, they're cool, like sport aluminum pedals. The feel in this car is absolutely atrocious. Compared to other cars I've driven, you have to get way into the pedal to start getting any brake response at all. And even when you do start to feel response, I mean, I realize these are just like the standard GT brakes. These are not the Brembos. But I have replaced the brake lines with stainless steel lines, and I've added .4 fluid. This is kind of unacceptable in my mind that this pedal would still feel so soft. And you know, the brakes still do stop, but it's just the feedback that you get as a driver is not what you're looking for. Okay, so the fifth and final thing, my last complaint about this car, is the stock ride height. So you'll see here that this is lowered. This is lowered 1.5 inches, which, you know, is pretty substantial lowering. I mean, that's just with lowering springs, and then I put some aftermarket shocks on there to support them. But this thing looked like a monster truck before, and I guess I didn't really even notice it too much until I lowered it as to how much I hated the way it looked before I lowered it. I used to think that lowering it would make it too uncomfortable or too, you know, it would be unreasonable for a daily driver. which maybe it was, but once this became more of a fun car and not a daily driver for me, it was an absolute must to lower this car. The stock ride height is actually designed for the engineers at Ford who want to drive these cars, so they can put snow chains on the car if they really want to. And that's just clearly, this is a Mustang GT. This is not really a car a lot of people are going to be driving in the snow, so why on earth would you be designing around that as a requirement to be able to put snow chains on your Mustang? Alright, so there you have it, guys. Those are the 5 things I absolutely despise about this car. And so don't get me wrong, there's still so many things that I love about this car, and I love driving every time I get the opportunity. And just as an honorable mention here, one thing I don't like about the car, but doesn't quite make the hate list, is the fuel economy. I think I average like 15 miles per gallon, so yeah, it's with pretty aggressive driving, but that's not ideal. This truly is such an amazing car, and it's such a huge leap forward for Ford with the Mustang, to finally go from that 4.6 platform to this Coyote V8, which has completely changed the game for them. And people are, supercharging these things up to 700, 800, 1,000 horsepower on stock internals. Like, that's just insane. You could never imagine those type of numbers with the old motors. So obviously I love the way this car looks, I love the way it sounds, I love the way it accelerates. But it's still a Mustang. It's not going to be perfect at everything. It's never going to be the best handling car in the world. It's never going to stop incredibly quickly. It's heavy. It's got a V8. It's kind of unbalanced, and that's just the nature of it. And you got to get used to that. And I still love it. That's why I have the Focus now to be my more fun, agile, cornering and braking car. And this is just the sheer power and excitement of getting out on the open road and driving. And I still love doing that. So I absolutely plan to hold on to this car for as long as I can. And despite its shortcomings, I still love it. Number 1 thing on the list of things I love about this car, the sound.